You have to tag the people. Yep. We're streaming?
I just launched it right now.
Alright, I'm going live then. Turn the mics on.
Go live right now. 3, 2, 1. Good morning, good morning. Checking the mic, checking the video. We are live here today.
Live. Hold on, the mics will be good to go any second. Just give me 2 seconds.
Thank you guys for tuning in. Today we're going to talk about being of service.
Oh yeah? Oh yeah.
There's a million ways to be of service.
Oh yeah.
It's rooted in
How many
humility.
ways is there to be of service?
A million ways.
A million, he says.
All day, every day, we can be of service in any situation. It's rooted in humility, which is not thinking myself as less, but thinking of myself less. And thinking what I can pack into life, not what I can take from it. That is my experience of practicing being of service, and that is where I find my happiness and purpose. And the beauty is we get to choose how we get to be of service. So it's not about the macro necessarily or the what, it's more about how I walk my path. So it's not about, I think people and I've been guilty of this, of getting so focused on the micro.
You usually lead in with the intro though, don't we, Zaya? But alright, keep going.
Yeah, so before I get too far into all that, I guess we'll read in with the intro. I'll let my brothers take
You
off.
want to lead in with it? This is the traditional saying of Weirman Media.
Well, you can say it.
All right, folks.
I like the way you say it.
We are live here in the Weirman Media studios this morning at 9:43 on Friday, thinking of you on this rainy day in Duluth. And the Vikings recently have started 0-2, so hopefully this weekend we can change a few things because 0-3 is an ugly start. The Twins are on a tear, and they just took over first place in the Central. So I'm pretty stoked about the Twins. I'm pretty disappointed about the Vikings. But overall, at Weirman Media, it's never right, it's never wrong. It is simply our perspective. And today, my brother had the idea of talking about being of service, and I said, well, that sounds like taking action and being of service. So that's what we're going to deep dive today, is being of service and taking action, because to me, there's a direct correlation there. So I'm going to let him continue with the lead-in. So.
Yeah, like I said, it's not about the what, it's about the how, right? So I can be of service a million ways. It's more important that no matter what I'm doing, it's how I'm doing it. The micro of what I'm doing doesn't matter as much. For me, like no matter what I'm doing, it's how I'm doing it. Am I being of service and making it about packing into the stream of life and giving, or am I making it about me and taking? When I can do that, no matter what I'm doing, I'm going to have a better time. Not only that, we get to choose how we be of service. Like, that's the beauty of choosing
that's a
to
great
find
topic,
your
though.
passions.
I want to challenge you there and say that's ego, and I think that we shouldn't choose how we be of service. But I think that's a great topic.
No, we get to choose completely. That's exactly why you should follow what you love.
Yes, but
I don't want to.
But if
I'm not going to do something I don't love every day. So what I'm
someone
saying,
can't be saying they're about being of service and then they're going to sit back and control. I just think that's a big topic.
There's no controlling going on. It's me. I'm saying is you can be of service every day. What I'm saying is you don't have to wake up and do anything you don't want to do. Like if you hate selling cars, you don't have to be a car salesman. What matters is that you're being of service no matter what you do. This is following your heart and your passion is all I'm saying. So what I'm saying is no matter what you're doing, like people, the reason why I'm saying this is because the reason why I'm saying that, I think you're misinterpreting what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is you get to choose how you get to be of service. You don't have to wake up and do something every day that you don't love just for money or time and energy. Like, that's what you talk about all the time. That's what we talk about.
But that's why I talk about with pursuing your passion. That's not with being of service.
Yes, it is. That's how you get to be of service, is through your passion.
Yes, that's the dream. That what you're talking about is the dream. It's when you finally you're doing what you love, you have control of your life, and you're being of
That's
service.
the beauty of life, though, is we get to choose our passions. We get to choose how we get to be of service.
But I think it's interesting because I think ego is about controlling how, right? Because if someone's really claiming to be that they want to be of service, then the best way of being of service, like if I'm really saying I'm about something, right? If I'm really about like saying I'm about helping others, or I'm about being of service, or I want to help the homeless, or I want to help bring value to other people in their life, then if I'm really about that, then in 2020, you actually you can't really say that without doing something online. Because if you're not doing something with an online digital presence and you're talking about being of service, then your reach is like 1 in a million. Because to talk about online presence, everything today that you do, no matter what it is, business or being of service, you need to leverage online avenues and online marketing.
Of course,
presence.
but you get to choose how you do that still.
You can reach millions of people.
Of course, but you're totally reading my message wrong.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying if someone's going to sit next to me and say they're about being of service, and then I say, oh, you can turn on a podcast and you can reach every continent in the world, then they would be like, if they were really about being of service and helping other people, they would take whatever platform they're currently using that's not online, and they would bring it online.
Of course.
Because then they would be about being of service and reaching as many people at scale as possible.
Of course.
So how come when someone says they're about service, but then they egotistically sit back and say, I'm not going to start a podcast or go online with it or be vulnerable, authentic, or courageous in leaning into it, and they make that decision? That's a personal decision. That's about me. That's not about we. That's ego over unity and being of service.
It's not a specific situation that I'm talking about.
No, but that's the situation I'm giving an example of.
Yeah, if someone were to do that, well, then they're not practicing being of service. They're letting their fear consume them and not do that. Of course. I'm saying you get to choose how you do that. You get to choose what the fuck you want to talk about and who you want to serve. I don't have to serve something, like I can't do everything at once. You're not sitting here talking about you're focusing on what you're being of service and value. Like you can't serve everybody on every issue. Like,
completely disagree. I think that's ego. That's saying that you can't connect. I think in life,
I'm not saying you can't connect, but
that's what you're saying.
Yeah, but you're up here talking about media company and online. You're not sitting here.
I'm talking about an online presence.
Yes, but
bringing service and being of service.
Of course, you should do that online, but you still have to have a niche that you're focusing on.
Yes, your story, yourself. Your
That's my point.
Your
like
truth.
Exactly. So if you're passionate about being of service and helping homeless people, you get to choose how you do that. You want to help homeless people. If that's your passion, now you're bringing that value online. If that person doesn't care about helping something in a different community, but they're passionate about homelessness, they get to choose of how they be of service by focusing on helping homeless people and bringing that value online. So of course you need to bring the value online and be of service to reach the scale. I'm not saying that. Like, of course I believe
there's no way that you can possibly be of service to homeless people without being authentic to your story and have.
Of course, but you're missing the whole point. Is what I'm saying is I get to choose. Like if I like making music or being an artist more, I don't have to sit here and do a completely different career path that I don't enjoy. I hate.
No.
That's I get to choose how I'm bringing up service.
100%.
That's what I'm saying.
That's not talking. You're choosing about what you're pursuing, not how. I'm talking about the how you're being of service and the reach and where.
Yeah, the how should be online.
You're talking about the what.
That's what we get to choose.
Yes,
that's
individualistically, self-awareness brings us to the what we want to pursue. 100%.
That's what I'm saying. So that's the beauty of this is no one can force you.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the being of service and taking action at scale that is selfless.
Of course, that's another side note of what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
I'm not telling anyone that they shouldn't go online and be of service.
But if I'm sitting in this chair today and I'm someone that says I'm about being of service, say I come from a program that's about being of service and working well with others, but then I'm only sharing my story with a small group of people in a few rooms at a time, but then I could turn on an online avenue and use the online avenue, and then I can share it with hundreds, if not thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, then I'm technically living in ego and disconnect and selfishness more than I am about
I wouldn't call
service.
someone selfish. I just think it's fear.
But
I'm not
fear
gonna
is ego.
I know, but I'm not going to sit there. But that's negative to tell someone you're selfish because you're afraid to go online. That's not how I'm going to paint it to someone. I'm going to say, hey man, if you really love being of service, I can tell. I suggest if you really want to reach a larger scale, hey man, you should come online and do this stuff. If you're afraid, you should get out of it. It's a good thing to do because it's really going to help and connect you to grow. I'm not going to sit there and be like, you're selfish because you don't want to go online. I don't think that's a good way to motivate someone get them to be of service online.
I'm not talking to an individual right now. I'm talking to the concept and principle.
Same here.
So right now,
that's the concept and principle. The concept and principle is you shouldn't tell someone they're selfish because they're not online being of service.
But the principle is I'm going to be candid in how I do things and principled. So if someone comes to me and they claim they're about something, I'm going to challenge them and say, okay, if you're about it, then be about it and bring it to the scale. It's simple.
You should educate them.
But you can't sit back and then be like, "Oh, I'm all about being of service," but then you're controlling where you're of service and how you're of service, and you're only doing it to a few select people because egotistically and fearfully you're afraid to share it with everyone.
Yeah, they're afraid.
That's my point. So being of service and being.
But again, I'm not going to sit there and bring someone down for being afraid. I'm going to try to build them up and tell them to tell their story and get online.
That's exactly what this is. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but I mean, they still are being of service. They're just the impact can't reach as far. If someone wants to do that, I'm going to say, hey,
that's the difference between ego. And
I know, I understand, but I'm never going to bring someone down.
I'm not bringing them down.
I would never like, hey man, I'm like, listen, you're doing a great job helping people. I think it's great because 99% of people don't even help people at all in their life. They don't even do it.
I think that's actually 100% an inaccurate statement.
Not many people go out in the community and do something like that.
I think there's actually a complete profound misperception and misinterpretation and ambiguity of media, and the fact is that there's a lot more good going on in the world than there is bad.
There is good going on, but not a lot of people actually.
90+% of people aren't doing something good
in their community.
I completely
in their community. I'm not talking about with their family or friends. A lot of people don't take time out of their life to go in the community and do volunteer work is what I'm saying. That's what I mean by that. I'm not saying people aren't good people. They're not a good co-worker. They're not a good husband, wife at home. I'm saying a lot of people that I know don't actually pragmatically every week take time out of their own life to do something in the community for free that requires no money and no recognition. I'm just talking about that. Anyone that's doing that, I have mad respect for because they're doing way more than most people.
This is what I'm talking about.
Secondly,
I'm talking about community versus world. You can reach the world and take part in the world by doing online something.
Of course.
As opposed to a small little community. Now you're reaching the world.
I know, but let me finish. So if we can get that person to go online, that's huge. But if that person's afraid, or you say egotistically,
that's ego. We've talked about it.
I know, but let me talk again. You're interrupting me again today. Just slow down. Let me finish my. But you're not letting me finish today. But you keep interrupting me today. Just let me talk. Again, so I think it's good to challenge them. But if they don't want to, I'm gonna be like, fine, man. At least keep doing the good work that you're doing. I hope someday you would want to come on and reach a larger impact. But if that person's unwilling to, there's really not much you can do to get them out of themselves, and you know this by asking people. But at the same time, I'm going to be like, you know what? At least you're doing something in this world to make it better than someone who's not.
But that's the audit. That means they're being of service. That means they're not really living out of selflessness. They're living in self. Because listen, this is my point. Exactly. You just made my point.
I just did. I know I did.
That means that they're living in themselves and fear and insecurities. And then when they are claiming to be of service, they're not really living in it because they're not living it.
Well, they are still being of service.
Because if someone comes to me, I'm responding to what you said now, and they say that they're being of service and they're being active in the community, but then I say, okay, well then share that on a simple YouTube or podcast or an online avenue that can then reach 100x the amount of people, and they say no, that's ego and fear and insecurities. You've stated in previous episodes, fear is ego, insecurity.
I know it is.
So then that means technically in that moment, in that audit of them saying that they technically must not be being of service or selfless when they are taking action to be of service, because right now that's showing me they're living in fear and insecurity and ego. So how can they go and be out of that ego and fear and insecurity if they're not doing it right here in that moment, and they're claiming that they're about being of service in X, Y, or Z location, but right here when they say that, they're living in self, ego, and fear and insecurities. So what would that make me believe that when they're being of service in the community on a smaller scale that they're not?
Just because they say no on a podcast doesn't mean when they leave that situation to go help someone in a different setting that they're still being egotistically of service.
But if someone's living in ego...
They're not always in ego. In that moment, that's just asking them to do something out of their comfort zone. So they've gotten comfortable in being of service in one area in one way, but they're not willing to get out of that comfort zone. I can get comfortable being of service, remove my ego and fear, but then to do something new, it's more challenging. For example, I can go clean up garbage in my community. That's comfortable. If someone asks me to go speak in front of 100 people, that someone might say no. That's a different way of being of service. So yes, in that moment they're being fear and egotistical, but for you to say that person's always in fear and being egotistical when they're serving somewhere else is ridiculous. Like, no, they're just egotistical.
That's not what I said. I'm just saying if someone's living in fear and insecurities, that means that's 100% very difficult to then go and say, okay, but over here I'm not. But here
it's
I
not
am.
very difficult because they're doing something over there that's probably not as something that's not as risk, not as putting yourself out there as much because it's maybe in a smaller group setting. There's nothing wrong with that.
So it's selfish.
What's selfish?
What you just said is selfish. It's in a setting they're comfortable, that they're comfortable with, that they're okay
At
with.
that point in their life, yeah, but that's still
So
growth.
it's ego keeping them from connecting to more people.
Some people don't want to grow. They want to stay where they're at for a while before they're ready to take
That's
that next
unhealthy.
step.
That's being stuck and stagnant and addicted and selfish and about me as a versus
I wouldn't
me.
call that person addicted or selfish in that situation. They might just not be ready to take that next step, dude. Some people aren't ready until they're ready. It is what it is. Like, I think it's good to challenge people like you're saying, but I'm not going to call that person selfish and egotistical because they're only being of service that way. I think it's important within that audit, in that moment, like you're telling them, to challenge them that to do more, and if they're not willing to do it, to be like, hey man, that's your ego and fear. You're letting control you from stepping out of that comfort zone to do that. But I'm never going to sit there to that person who's already sacrificing time and energy and being vulnerable in that setting to help people and is making an impact at some level. That's still super fucking important. We need to use those people and build them up and keep them doing that at least versus breaking them down. But if they come to you, I think it's good to challenge them, but you don't need to break someone down to challenge them. You can just say, hey man, I think you're in ego and fear right now, and I think you really should step out of that. You can reach way more people. But if you're not ready to do that right now, that's fine. There's nothing I can do to force you. That's on you. We can't force you to change. That's all I would tell them. And then I would move on to the next person. Like, we don't spend too much energy. One of the things that I've learned is not spending too much energy on one person. If someone's not willing to get where they're at, then they're not. Like, if that person never grows out of that comfort zone right there, that's on them. It's not us to change them. You know, it's not on us to change them. They could definitely reach a larger impact by coming online. But I'm not going to sit here and fucking worry about one person when we gave them our 2 cents and audited the conversation. I'm going to move on until the next person actually wants to take the next step and go online and do the podcast or do whatever.
So at Women Media, the concept, everything that we talk about is online, leveraging your online marketing campaign and online presence via cultural relevant channels. So everything that we talk about is just about that. That's why I'm leaning into this with the topic of action and being of service. Because ultimately, I hear so many people repeatedly, and you hear business owners talk about, oh, I'm doing this with my business. I'm doing this. All right, well, yeah, but that is more egotistical than it is selfless. What are you doing that is truly at scale, reaching other people reaching out as far as you possibly can? Because if I really care about others and I want to be of service, I want to reach as many people as I possibly can, right? If I'm really passionate about it. Like for me, I am passionate about helping and sharing my story and helping people via my stories and experiences and reaching as many as I can. Once I realized I could reach thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions on this eventually, I was like, I'm in. So if I love something and I'm about something, there's a direct correlation between then wanting to lean into and reach and impact as many people as possible behind that subject, topic, idea, service, or solution. Whatever it is, whether it's your story, whether it's a business or a nonprofit or a podcast, an idea, something that you're bringing forward to the marketplace that brings people value freely. That's what I'm talking about. And then reaching people at scale with that. But if I'm just going to sit and control where I do that and how I do it and the number of people I reach up while doing it, that's me taking control and that's me letting ego run rampant, in my opinion, as opposed to saying, oh, if I'm really about this and I'm going to talk like I'm about it, I need to reach as many people as possible. That's why I challenge businesses all the time, and that's why I'm doing this on a podcast, because I want to challenge other people to do and share and take action at scale via online presence, because you can reach thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people by doing so. You just turn on your phone, you turn on social media, you turn on Facebook Live, you turn on YouTube Live, you turn on Instagram Live, you turn on TikTok Live, you turn on these channels, and now you're reaching thousands and thousands of people. And if you're really about what you're about and you want to be of value and be of service, which ultimately being of service and working with others is the highest level of spirituality. It's the highest level of business as well. Business is directly that. Business is one of the highest levels of mixing science and spiritual principles. It's business, scientific operation, and scientific systems and strategies merging with spiritual principles of being of service and working well with others. So if that's the case, then you want to help and impact as many people as possible. That's why I say so much about the online presence, because to me, that is where you should. That's where you're going to make the most impact.
Yeah.
But I guess if I just want to, I don't know. I just think it's interesting, the concept of controlling who I give it to and who I don't.
Yeah, I mean, if you're running a business, it's a little different. Like that person, if you're running a business versus just the individual, of course it doesn't make any. Of course, if you're running a business and you have a product in the marketplace, of course you want to do these things. And if you don't want to do these things, like you said, then you're egotistically trying to control your business. But I was just speaking on the individual level. I'm not assuming individuals want to put something in the marketplace. They might not want to. But if you're a business owner,
everything that you put out is putting out into a marketplace.
What I was talking about before, though, was an individual isn't necessarily an entrepreneur trying to start a business and go online.
But if I'm an individual putting something out into the world, that's putting it out into a sector or area of the world.
But they're not thinking like an entrepreneur. They might not want to go online. An individual is just trying to help homeless people in the community. They might not try to be an entrepreneur online doing all that.
But that's exactly my point.
I know
they're not really about it. If you're not going to start something or we talk about this taking action.
Well, they are still taking action and being of service.
Are you starting a nonprofit? Are you starting a podcast? Are you
starting to raise money
for them?
They don't necessarily. They might not be doing that extreme though, bro. I'm just telling you a simple example where someone could be being of service and not trying to do all that. But if you do want to start a nonprofit and you do want to start a business, then you definitely should be having it in the marketplace. And then if you're not willing to do these things, like start a podcast, like you're talking about talking to business owners, if they don't want to start a podcast, then they are limiting themselves from maximizing their growth online and reaching more people. So to me, like someone that puts a product into the marketplace is being kind of hypocritical if they say they have a product in the marketplace like you're saying, but they're not really trying to reach their audience. So you use an example of how you've tried to reach out to a lot of people and they're not business owners and they're not wanting to do a podcast or come on the show, but yet
or even respond to a message.
Yeah, they have a product in the business world, but yet they're not following through with the consumer trying to reach out to them and get them to talk more about who they are. So I totally get that. That's a little different than someone who is just an individual that is stuck in fear and not willing to expand to the next level of going online or starting a nonprofit. And I think it's really good to challenge.
I think it's the exact same things. I disagree.
Yeah, I mean, you have the right to disagree. That's your perspective. So, again, though, it's still the same thing. Like you said, it is fear, it is ego. And at the end of the day, all we can do is challenge them, whether it's an individual who's not willing to start a nonprofit, they're just kind of volunteering at a homeless shelter and they're not really growing outside of that, or someone who has a product online and they're not willing to do the next step and expand from making $5,000 or $10,000 a month to actually $100,000 a month or 1 million people a year and doing a podcast and getting out there and telling their story, what made them do what they want to do. At the end of the day, it is still fear and ego, and it's just good to challenge people to do more. I think is the key for me. It's like, hey man, just do more. And like you said, if you really love and you're passionate about something, I think those people will. And I think it's just good to keep challenging people in a way which is like, hey man, just do more. Like be positive about it. Like, hey man, you could be doing more. You could be helping more people. That's how I always like to frame it. I don't want to call someone selfish. I was like, you could be helping more people. You could do more. And tell someone you could help way more people. This is a cool idea. You're a great person. You're helping homeless people. You have a great business. We've looked at your website. We think it's good. We think what you offer is good, but we really feel like you could help more people if you did these things, if you applied the Weirman X model, if you did a podcast, if you shared your personal vulnerable story more like we're doing. We feel like you could help more people and have a larger impact in your business and in life and your community, and then you could give that back more. So I just think it's really important for me when talking about that to like, it's good to address the fear and ego, but it's also good to build them up. Like, hey man, you could do more.
Hey, we're on a
like,
podcast.
Do more.
Do more for sure. I just talk about pursuing dreams and passions, and I think all of what we talk about, to me, comes back. I try and focus on the principles of the Weirman media model and online presence, and I try to focus on the principles that we talk about. And I agree with what you just said, but at the same time, I've learned that the most candid leaders are the best leaders, and I've learned that having a forceful, direct candid personality is one of the characteristics that goes hand in hand with being a great leader. You don't withhold stuff. You're candid and direct, and it's great communication that way. So for me, if someone is about pursuing their dreams and passions, and like shout out to Home Base Minnesota, shout out to Lifehouse, some of the organizations out there that are doing this for homeless people, I think that's great, and
That's a great example.
Yeah, and I want to have you guys on the show and talk about it because homelessness is a part of my background. I've been homeless. But a big part of everything that I talk about is about reach and connecting to others. Everything in life comes back to reach and connecting to humans. So the more open you are and relatable you are, and the more you give open avenues to connect to other people, that's why I share my story of my brain surgery and my homelessness and my addiction and my mom dying. It opens me up to be relatable to other people. And it also opens me up for people to realize I'm authentic and transparent with myself, so that if they ever do want to talk to me or be involved in anything I'm doing, they realize I'm 100% transparent because I'm sharing my failures and I'm sharing my darkest, most deep secrets. So that opens me up to reach and connect with more people. So if I was going to sit back, and I've done very little in the past when it comes to speaking. You can ask my brother. Up until we launched this podcast and I leaned into Gary Vee's model, I had done very little when it comes to speaking. I had spent most of my first 28 years listening and taking action, taking risks, and making mistakes, failing, and also having some successes. But most of my first 28 years, I did very little talking. I did very little outreach. I did very little connecting with others. I was traveling the world, taking risks and experiencing things, testing, measuring, and developing, and taking direction from mentors, and failing, ultimately, most of the time failing. But I also had some successes. But ultimately, it's about reach and connection. And the largest reach and most connection you can make today is online. And it's just the reality of it. So if someone's going to want to reach and connect with people, and you want to be of service, the highest level of that is business. There's just nothing. So it's just really interesting how many people in the background are going to sit and control what level they do that at. I think that's okay. You're right, Zaya. But at the end of the day, isn't that ego? That's what I'm saying. Like, if I'm just going to sit back and talk about all these things, like if I'm someone that's going to have all these political opinions about homelessness, about birth control, about babies, about the president, about politics, about businesses, about restaurants, about human rights and society, but then I'm going to have these opinions online, and I'm going to be part of cancel culture, and I'm going to make comments and debate and argue in comment sections online, and then I'm going to talk about it in groups of people in small rooms and medium-sized rooms, but then when it comes time to turn on a camera or it comes time to record it and share it with the world, I'm going to withdraw. To me, that is a huge shining light on someone, ego and fear and control, and they're completely to me, that contradicts everything.
Well, they're not being of service at all, so that's a different discussion. That person's not even being of service in their community at all. They're just talking online.
Yeah.
So.
But if they're still taking part in all of that, that's
they're not really being of service. That's just a hypocrite. Someone who talks and talks and never.
But if they're still going to local events in small rooms and groups, and they're sharing their story and helping other people, or they're doing something for others, or they're doing some small amount of community service in rooms with others in their community, in smaller rooms and medium-sized rooms and large-sized rooms, and they're being of service and they're volunteering or they're giving community service, but then at the same time they're taking no action. To me, this all comes back to action. Well, to me that's a huge issue. That's not them really being about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that person, if they're still doing those things, is good. But like you said, again, they're just their fear and ego is preventing them from reaching a larger audience. I think if someone's still doing that stuff is good, but again, by going online and doing what we're doing, they're going to have a larger impact. They're going to be able to have a larger impact in society by going online and being of service at scale, like we're talking about here with social media platforms and podcasts. So I think anyone and everyone should do that if that's eventually. But that person's still being of service. I think another thing to audit this is when it comes to business, and we've listened to this before, is you might not be the person to do this, but you can team up with someone. For example, like when you start a business, there always needs to be a front person, a face, doing this, the podcast, the sales and marketing. You might be a really good, this is a new perspective to put on this, is why I think this sometimes is really important to have a team. Because you might not be the face of the franchise, so to speak. You might not be the franchise tag. But you might be a killer, boots on the ground person behind the scenes doing stuff. But if you team up with the right person, if you're somehow the person that's not willing to do this, you can team up with someone who's willing to do the face front of your nonprofit or your business. You could still be the behind the scenes. You can team up and partner with someone who's willing to step in front of that camera and represent that brand that you, the same principles and brand that you represent. If you team up with someone, they can be your face of the franchise now and then reach that scale. So I think that's really important to do that. At the end of the day, me and my brother believe anyone can come online and talk, that even the most introverted person on the planet, it can do that. Speaking is a skill, and the more you do it, there's less fear there. But at the end of the day, if you just feel like you're someone who never would, but you still care, this is how you can be of service, by pivoting and creating a team and recognizing and auditing what you're not good at, and maybe you're just an awkward person. You could find someone, and then you have a team now with that person. You can bring this product to the marketplace at scale and have someone else be the front man or the front woman or the front person while you're doing the behind the scenes stuff. So that's another way I feel like to kind of work around that issue. But I still think it's important to challenge that person to get out of themselves and still get online, because I think everyone should do that. But there are just some people that will never be the front man online.
I think that's a great point.
They never will.
But everything you just talked about.
They never will. So having a team.
I think that just connects back to everything that I was just talking about.
Yeah, it does. But
that means that person then is going to they're going to remove ego, and they're going to humble themselves, and they're going to connect themselves to a group of people that they align with and want to work with. But in order for them to do that and connect with others, this comes back to reaching and connect. If I want to connect with a group of people and work together with a common goal and mission, that requires me to have the 5 characteristics that we talk about of focus, openness, respect, courage, and commitment, to commit to something, to have courage behind it, to be open to sharing my story or value with others, to be respectful and understanding of others. And to me, these are the 5 key characteristics of the Weirman X model. It's focus, respect, courage, commitment, and openness. But if I'm not open to sharing my story, or I'm not open to being someone that is a part of a team but not the one, or if I'm not courageous or committed to being of service or taking action, and I'm not focused on reaching as many people or helping as many people or being of action or taking action and being of service, then to me, that's lack of self-awareness, that's ego, that's the inability to attach to others and connect to others. And then self-awareness is also then the number one thing that you just talked about, with understanding what role I'm going to play. But if I'm consumed by ego and inability of taking action and connecting with others, then I'm going to have a hard time having self-awareness, because I haven't been able to detach from myself and understand what I'm good at and what I'm not, and then leaning into my strengths, and then finding the ability to work with others and do so in a fluid, flexible fashion, following these characteristics we talk about, being transparent, being vulnerable, being authentic, and inspecting, adapting, and so forth. Because ultimately, taking action and sharing your value freely at scale is what we're talking about. But if someone's living in ego, they're not going to be able to do that.
No.
So how can someone come and be a part of a team like ours?
Like I just said, they need to figure out what they're good at and hire a team, have a team. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but that's the committing to something bigger than that.
Yeah,
again.
that person that doesn't want to speak could still be a great asset. They just find someone else to speak. Obviously, the extreme example that you just gave of someone who's unwilling to do anything, of course, but that's not what I've been talking about this whole time. If someone's just unwilling to do the one thing and speak in front of a camera, which is the main issue I think we've been talking about, being at scale,
totally,
I think
agree with you that they can still.
You were giving an extreme example of someone who seems like unwilling to do anything, then you're fucked. If that person's like that, sorry guys. If you're unwilling to do that, then I would be hesitant to see what work they've been doing, that it's not driven in ego. That person that you described to that extreme is probably being of service for their own selfish reasons and not unconditionally love. Someone who's unconditionally loving, being of service at that level is just afraid to speak. I think that person would be open-minded to a conversation, to find a team and realize that they just need to get on a team. There are going to be people, like you said, that are so egotistical, doing it selfishly, that's out there too. But I think most people, they're just too afraid to speak, like public speaking. I think that's the number one thing that I've seen, and I think the reason why people don't want to come on here is they're afraid of public speaking. And I think it's good to challenge anyone. At the end of the day, if you're not, the next step in humility would be auditing how you can build a team to get to the product at scale without you having to be the franchise tag.
I think that's a great point. I think everyone can have value. I think you're right, and then you can find your place within that team.
Yeah.
But I think what you're talking about is a big thing, and it correlates back to everything we said is about that self-awareness.
Yeah.
And that is humility, and that is openness to not being this person, but being this person, and being a part of something greater than yourself, and connecting with others, and being humble, and being ego-free.
Yep.
And that is difficult to do if you're living in in fear and ego.
Yeah, I think most people, though, I mean, and this is just my experience. I can't speak on
This
anything.
is why it's so hard for us in America to have culture and have a group come together to achieve goals, because it's such an ego-driven nation.
But and we're talking about the problem here, but I want to focus back on the solution when it comes to being of service. Again, though, if someone's being of service and it's not rooted in ego and selfishness, I'm still really happy for that person that they're doing something. Because again, from my experience in my little world, the people that I know in my life since I've been born till now, a lot of people don't take pragmatically every week and do something out of their life in their community just for volunteer. Like I've learned to do this since I've gotten sober. I never did this before I got sober. I am the person from the time I was born till I was 23 years old. I never did anything. The only volunteer service work I did before I got sober was because I had to by the courts telling me I needed to do something because I committed a crime.
I think the majority of people are actually making it about themselves in service.
So I can get into that, but I'm just saying, going back into, since I got sober, was taught to me that the key to staying sober is being of service, helping others stay sober, like in that aspect. And then that principle can be applied to any area of my life. When I wake up, when I go to work, when I'm with my family. But the key thing that I've learned to do is pragmatically take time out of every week to be of service and volunteer my time to help people in a community that I'm not getting paid for, that I don't need any recognition for at all. There's a lot of people that don't do that, in my opinion. In my life that I've seen, I don't see a lot of people that do that consistently. Then you have people like you're saying that do it, and they begin to do it, and it feeds their ego, and then that begins to affect how they're being of service, and they make it more about them, and it's a status thing because they're helping all these people.
To me, business is a great example of what you're talking about.
Yeah, so
major companies that say they're helping someone by providing a service, and they're manipulating the consumers and making a bunch of money, but they're not really bringing them any kind of value intellectually or building them up.
Yep. So on an individual level and a business level, I've seen that. Like my brother's saying, I've seen people do this, and I've seen businesses do this. And I don't even think they're horrible people necessarily. Some of them are. I think a lot of it is just them, and I think a lot of them believe what they're doing is really good. I just don't think the key is, like my brother's saying, is I don't think they're really doing a deep dive in their own honesty about why they're doing it. Because that's why they're blinded, and they're not really seeing that there is form of manipulation there. It's not rooted in authentic, vulnerable storytelling and connecting and really bringing immense value. It's more transactional based. That feeds them ego, makes them feel better because they feel like they're doing something. And at the end of the day, like, I don't think some of those people are horrible. There are people that are really horrible. They're extremely just straight lies, fakes, doing it behind the scenes. Those people are
I think it's the majority
of
people.
Those people are fucked up. But I think those other people, I think they just need a direct audit that they really could be bringing more value and not focusing on a monetary transaction to make money. I think that's the key when you look at certain businesses, that the fact that they're really not doing more for the community, that they're really not doing enough for the community, that they're so money focused that they're not really rooted in bringing value to the community development. So I think at the end of the day, like bringing this big picture, being of service when it comes to business, are you really focusing on community development? Are you really focusing on bringing the most value to your end consumer, whatever it is you're doing? That is the ultimate way of being of service, like my brother said. So that is the audit as a business. And as someone, if you're an entrepreneur who wants to do a nonprofit, if this is your idea for the business, it ends up being on you. The buck stops with you, the person or the two people or the three people who created the idea.
At the
top, you can't blame your employees, you can't blame the market climate, you can't blame COVID, you can't blame your city you live in or the cold weather. It starts with the top, and this is where leadership comes in, where you're sacrificing money or you're sacrificing certain things and putting your consumer and your community development first, because that's the ultimate way of being of service. And I think especially with business owners, you should be harsher with them than an individual, because you have millions of dollars of people and thousands of people you're affecting, and it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. I think I'm a little more...
You're more comfortable being candid with the business owner
than an individual.
That's interesting.
I think it's important. I just think if that was me, I think it's important because there's millions of dollars at play that they're manipulating people for money. I think that's extremely different than someone when there's no money involved. It's just doing some service work on the side. There's no money involved there, but someone who has thousands and thousands or millions of dollars manipulating people for their money, that is a serious issue if they're not being authentic in community development and really caring about the person if they just want their money.
And that's
a larger issue that my brother says when he audits businesses, when he does that. Like, that's a serious thing. And I think it's more serious the bigger the business. Right?
People don't realize this.
Isn't it more serious, you'd say? So like you said, big corporations, the bigger the business, won't you think it's more serious? Because there's more families involved that work for them and consume their products and follow them, and they have the biggest influences in politics. They have the biggest influence in politics.
I agree with you 100%, but I just look at the principle of what you just said, and I use it for everything. I don't look at personalities over principles. I look at the principle. And I think you're right. I think it's more so a little bit maybe with businesses than individuals, but I'm still going to be candid and direct with businesses and individuals.
Of course.
I'm not going to change for anyone. I'm just going to lean into the
principle. Of course, you
principle.
shouldn't change for anybody.
So at the end of the day, I think what you just said is true. The more money you make off a community, the more benefit you're making off of people and the consumers in America. There should be a direct correlation between that and how much you're bringing freely on the front end of the funnel and at scale.
Yep.
So businesses like Amazon, I agree with you 100%. Amazon should be doing all kinds of stuff for free, and they are. I mean, he does some amazing things. He donated, I don't know, an insane amount of money to global warming, Jeff Bezos, like last year, I believe, or a couple months ago. Remember that? He donated a shit ton of money. But yeah,
I think he started an actual nonprofit.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think being of service comes down to me taking action, sharing my authentic, vulnerable truth at scale. And I think that's for every business or story. Everyone has a truth. Everyone has a story. For me, if I'm a leadership brand, it's my story. If it's your business, that's your business story. So you can separate those, and you can still do this with that. And it's sharing it at scale and giving something freely to others. Businesses that are just manipulating the consumer, that's addicted to speed and that's addicted to friction-free processes, services, and solutions, because we as consumers are addicted to comfort and the easier, softer way, we buy and purchase items, services, and solutions that bring us time back, because we think we're buying time when we buy something that's faster, and because we're living a life where we're time poor and we spend all of our time doing something we don't enjoy. And so then we buy our time back and try and reverse engineer it by buying and spending our dollars that we hard-earned dollars and time and spent to earn those dollars. We spend it consuming services as in solutions that are friction-free. That's why when you see those ads about 5G, faster, 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 everything. When you look at the horse versus the car, humans have always been about speed and friction-free. Everything in life comes back to speed and removing friction from life. And friction heavy versus friction free. So when we look at that, most big businesses are manipulating that, and they're just making dollars off that. On the front end, they're using advertising and marketing to manipulate the consumer and the audience, and then they're collecting dollars on the back end, and then they're paying their CEOs and their shareholders, and they're not bringing anything freely to the consumer. And then we have a member in the audience with a question. John Worth said he donated millions to St. Stephen's in Minneapolis, a homeless shelter and housing program. Amazon makes an effort at least to give back. I agree, John. I'm a huge fan of Amazon. I actually just recently purchased some of their stock, and I agree. I think Jeff Bezos is massively judged and predicated against, and I think he does some amazing things that a lot of people don't give him credit for. I think that's really cool. John Worth, I want to say thanks for being with us, and your attention is our oxygen, and shout out to Home Base. It's a homeless, John Worth started a nonprofit for homeless folks in the Twin Cities and throughout Minnesota, and he's going to be being on the show here any day, next week, I believe, or any day, but we're going to give him some pre-rolls and mentions on the show moving forward, because he's doing some amazing things with homelessness, and I think that's really, really cool. Because homelessness is, to me, it's one of my callings. I want to start an alternative housing solution. I want to try and infiltrate the sector of housing and provide some kind of alternative solution of affordable housing for homeless or people in general, because times are going to get tough, and there's going to be times when people don't have money and they're homeless, like during COVID. This is going to get worse. There's going to be something worse, and then people are going to need affordable housing and solutions, and I think it's community-based living that is the solution, and it's more affordable, and it's about tolerance for others and developing culture, community, and unity via tolerance and love and compassion and kindness, like the More Love Nation brand talks about, by living in closer quarters. But yeah, I think that's some really cool, important stuff.
Thanks for tuning in, John. I don't have much to add to this topic. Again, being of service, I think it's make it so it's not about you. I think that's the key, is no matter what I'm doing, am I making it about me? That's where the ego comes in, like my brother says. If I'm doing service work but I'm making it about me, it's not really being of service. If I'm doing it and I'm honestly in that moment, as I'm doing it all, I'm thinking about who I'm serving and how I can best serve them. That's what matters most. And that my action will back that up if I'm thinking like that. So if my thinking is making it about me, my action will show that, right?
Yeah.
If I'm making it about you, my action will show that too. So that's the key. And no matter what you're doing, I think it's good to start somewhere. So if you're doing nothing right now, start to do something. If you're hearing this and you're willing to step out now and get in front of the camera, start doing it. If you're that person that is you think it's not you and you're afraid, find a franchise tag, as I like to call them, that's willing to go in front of the camera and talk. Trust me, there's people that love talking in front of the camera. So I do. I have fun doing it. So if that's you, great. If it's not, find a team. Do an audit and have enough humility to be like, I need to find someone on my team so we can get this idea out there. And if you're in your community and you're just doing stuff behind the scenes, that's great. But like my brother says, let's challenge you to get out there and do that at scale now online. If you're already doing stuff, if you're already doing the work, it's kind of the motto of film your hustle, speak your truth that I talk about.
Exactly.
If you're already doing the hustle, why not film it? Just film it, your hustle.
If you're really about it.
If just film your hustle and speak your truth. So that's the key. So it's like, that's all you need to do. If that's something you feel like you can't do, you need to find someone who has the same principles as you that is willing to do that part of it. I think that's the challenge, is to do it yourself or find the person to do it. And if you really care, you'll do it. And like my brother says, if you're not willing to do those things, then you're probably just going to be stuck where you're at for a while. And you still could be making a good impact what you're doing on a local level, which is great. I'm never going to hate on someone for doing that. But you could reach a larger audience and help more people. So this challenge of being of service, there's no end game here. The key of being of service is every day is a new day, and how can I maximize my service? So no matter what you did yesterday, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I did yesterday. That's what I learned about being in recovery. What I did to stay sober yesterday, what I did to help someone yesterday is irrelevant. I have to wipe that clean from my ego and my brain, and I'm a new person today that needs to be of service more. And and that's where the growth comes in. Because if I keep going off of what I did yesterday to be of service, that's where the ego comes involved. Now I start to think, well, I don't need to be of service today. You know what I've did the last year? I've did way more than people. It's easy for me to say that. Why do I need to be of service today then? So it's hard because our egos are real things, and like my brother says, it gets us stuck in ourselves. So it's like it's good to challenge people, and I think it's just like, don't look at other people too. Don't compare yourself to someone else. There's always someone doing less than you, and there's always someone doing more. That's why I don't get on my high horse, because there's always someone doing way more than me, and there's always someone doing way less. But my job is to focus on my side of the street. Am I trying to be of more service today? That's it. That's all I can say. I don't really have much else to add.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think that's a great topic, but the topic for today was being of service and taking action, and I think there's a direct correlation between me and claiming to want to be about being of service and the amount of action I'm taking, and the willingness and openness and the courage and commitment and focus I have when I'm taking that action. But if I'm just going to control how open I am, how authentic I am, how much of my story I share, I just think that in general it comes down to trying to reach as many people as possible and impact and help as many people as possible and connect to as many people as possible. And if you're making a lot of money, it makes it easier. So at the end of the day, that's why I talk so much about the things I talk about, because pursuing your passions for profit then gives you the avenue to then make money doing something you love and find fulfillment and joy doing what you love, and then open up and be authentic and vulnerable to that and sharing your value behind that. And then making money doing so leads you to then be able to do more good and reach more people and have a higher impact. The companies that make the most money in America today, I challenge them because the majority of them are not doing good with their business platform. They are using it to manipulate, maintain control, and not bring value to our human capital. Our human capital nowadays in America has to pay for intellectual insight. They have to pay for education. They have to pay for a degree. They have to pay to learn. No one's giving stuff away very freely other than Gary Vaynerchuk. Shout out to Gary Vaynerchuk. His 4D Business Deep Dive is available on YouTube. It's a $12,000 seat given away freely, repeatedly, over and over again. A $12,000 ticket free. And there's very few people that are giving away free intangible investments in humans. They're not investing in our human capital. We're a democracy of dollars in America, not a democracy of our humans. So being of service and connecting with others via online creative, cultural relevant content creation that is relatable and authentic and real, so that you can connect and relate to your audience in a vulnerable, authentic fashion that is humanistic, that is about your struggle, your strife, your pain, your battles, your successes, and your failures. And that's why it's so important to lean into those and those stories and those failures and your pain and your suffering and your difficulties in life, because that's going to make you more relatable and make you more capable of connecting to a larger scale audience, and doing so in a deep, meaningful, powerful fashion. So that's what we're about at Women Media. We're about propelling businesses and brands and individuals to the intersection of culture and attention, where their reach, impact, and influence is maximized. So if you want to reach and impact and influence and help other people in a positive way and do good, it's about propelling you to the intersection of culture and attention. And it just so happens to be that culture and attention in 2020 is all present online via social media channels and YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and so forth. So if you're not sharing it there, then you're not really truly having the largest impact you possibly can. And it just matters. It's just a matter of me getting out of my own way and saying yes, rather than me being the one controlling where and how many people I connect to. So I think it's a great episode. I think it's a great topic. And
Great points.
I think it's really important stuff. So at the end of the day, it's not right, it's not wrong at Women Media. It is simply our perspective.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. Be of service today.
Yeah, I'm really going to keep trying to lean into the Weirman stuff, because